Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is May the 5th, 2017, Friday, day 63. Well, it looks like James Comey and Admiral Rogers did appear for their closed-door session yesterday. And we have a couple of articles that I'm going to provide links for you. One from Reuters, fake news, and also from our good friends over at the New York Times. Also, fake news. And the reason I'm giving you these two links is really because I really want you to, if you have the time, to take a minute to read them, just to see exactly what we mean by fake news, just the way that they spin everything completely to keep the narrative going, the discredited narrative of Russian hacking and Russia and Trump collusion, yet completely not even, it's not that they don't mention the possibility of Trump being spied on, but the fact that they completely diss it. And in the New York Times article, I'm going to read you a quote from one of the paragraphs there, where they actually suggest that Donald Trump is even suggesting that he is saying that that story is not true. So it's amazing. You actually have to read these articles, and they're typical of all the articles that you'll see from all the mainstream sites regarding what happened in those closed-door session hearings yesterday. Now, it's pretty much what we've been expecting, and what I said, that they wouldn't really tell us much about what happens in those closed-door sessions. But now they've come up with a new term because they know that the word or the phrase closed door, what that says to people is, oh, secret, they don't want us to know. So now they've come up with a new word that you're starting to see the past couple of days, and that word is classified. They want a classified session. Now that just means they want a backdoor session, closed door session. In other words, they don't want to sit in front of the TV cameras and have to try to spin and maneuver their way out of their false narratives. And then when they are grilled on something that actually does have some basis in fact, that being the surveillance of Trump and his team, they know they're going to look bad. So anyway, we're just going to go through this for you anyway, and I'm going to break down a little bit of the tricky wording that they use to try to control what you think about things. I can spot this stuff, very easily, but I'm going to point it out to you by just focusing on a couple sentences they use in the Reuters and the New York Times article. So anyway, Comey and Admiral Rogers meet yesterday behind closed doors, and they come out and they do a joint press conference, or a joint statement, and this would be the two leaders of the committee, which would, of course, be Schiff and, what's his name? Adam Schiff and Conaway, Mike Conaway. Mike Conaway is the Republican that took over when Devin Nunes was forced to step down. So anyway, let's go to the Reuters one first. And of course, I have provided the link for both the Reuters and the New York Times articles for you so that you can read this for yourself. But anyway, the article is entitled Russian Meddling. Yes, that's what the hearings are about. That's what the closed-door session was about, Russian meddling. Not a single word about surveillance or anything like that. Russian meddling. And it basically says, the first paragraph in their article is basically, Schiff and Conaway had a successful meeting on Thursday, projecting unity. Both addressed reporters after Comey and Rogers testified in the classified hearing. And they stated, Schiff and Conaway, that, quote, the witnesses had provided some additional insights, and the committee was working very well together. So let's go ahead and let's break this down. What does this mean? Okay, well, what this means to me is that just like they caved on the budget, the Republicans are going to cave on this investigation. They've obviously reached an agreement between the two, which goes something like this. Schiff looking at Conaway and going, well, this surveillance thing on Trump, man, I looked at all that stuff that Nunes looked at. Boy, it sure looks bad for our side. But boy, that wouldn't be very good for a lot of your big donors, the military-industrial complex, the national security state, the deep state. They're not going to be very happy if we go out and pursue this line of questioning. Of course, at the same time, we don't look very good on the things that we've done. Maybe we can reach a compromise. In which case, Conaway says, yeah, we really don't want the pushback from the military-industrial complex and any of those folks. We got to provide them cover. And yeah, it would be nice to drag all of Obama's people out here and grill them in front of an open session and show where they were spying on Trump and using the intelligence agencies and law enforcement community to conduct this highly illegal political operation. But we really don't want all these problems, do we? No, we both just want to keep the status quo, protect the deep state, and cover both of our heinies. So let's go out and make a nice, friendly joint statement and tell everyone that we're now buddy-buddy. Everything is wonderful. We're going to get all this figured out. Of course, we're not going to actually hold anybody accountable, but everything is lovey-dovey. So let's look at some of these little buzzwords. Successful meeting. Okay. A successful meeting. What that means to me is that Rogers and Comey basically sat down and they probably talked about golf, probably talked about baseball, probably talked about the wife and kids, their vacation plans, and they basically just kicked it around for a little while. And because there's really nothing going on here, they probably had some donuts and coffee. Maybe they went into lunch and had some sandwiches delivered. So this is what a successful meeting would be when you sit down with a couple of spooks and a couple of corrupt members of Congress. That is a successful meeting. Okay. Also, projecting unity. Hey, that means that that both sides are going to sell out their constituents who, on the Democrat side, they want to see the Democrats push as hard as they can to try to get Trump impeached because he was collaborating with Russians. But of course, Schiff is now going to make sure that he doesn't push that issue too hard. And of course, on the other side, the Republican Conaway, what we all want to see is Obama and his people held accountable for the illegal political sabotage that they attempted to pull on Trump, which failed. So projecting unity, what that means is that they've reached an agreement to cover each other's asses. That's what that means. Both addressed reporters after Comey and Rogers testified. Classified hearing. Classified is now their new buzzword because they know that the word closed session, what that conjures up in people's mind, which is more smoky backroom deals being cut for the Republicans and Democrats to cover each other's butts. And so they need to find another word that sounds more, that doesn't conjure up quite those same images, so that they can do a cover-up, which is what they always do. So that's the new buzzword now. Classified is now going to replace the word closed session. Now, also, the witnesses had provided some additional insights. Additional insights. Not exactly what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is hardcore facts and evidence of what was done, who did it, when they did it, why they did it, how they did it, where they did it. That's what we want to know. Additional insights. I'm not looking for additional insights. I'm looking to hang someone for the crimes that they committed. And the only crimes that we know of at this point for sure was the unmasking of the call between Mike Flynn and the Russian ambassador. And we can highly suspect that because Susan Rice unmasked a lot of these people within the Trump campaign and then created a spreadsheet and disseminated that information throughout the intel agencies, that is probably highly illegal too if it was politically motivated and there's not justification for that. So this is what we mean. These are not additional insights is not going to get it done. That's not going to cut it. I'm sure that, again, as I've been saying, Donald Trump knows that this is exactly what's going to happen because it's exactly what always happens. And that's why I believe that we're going to learn a lot more from the civil suit that's being filed against BuzzFeed and Christopher Steele by Mr. Gubarev. And I think eventually Trump will get to the point where he will do this as well, because I don't think Trump's going to let go of it. I really don't. He doesn't seem like the type of person to me that's going to let go of something like that. They try to destroy him. They're still trying to destroy him. And they continue to do all these things that they're doing. We talked yesterday about the fact that they're going to try to do an Article 25 impeachment. We know that they're going to keep beating up on him every way that they can. This is only going to harden his position, make him even more angry, and motivate him even more to drag these people into a civil court, which I'm sure at this point Donald Trump understands that that's the only place that he's actually going to find any justice. And so that's what I think about that. Now, of course, neither of them took any questions. Never took any questions. They came out and made a joint unity statement and didn't take any questions. Also, in this particular Reuters, if you read the story, there's literally a couple sentences in there where they say, quote, that Trump pushed back against accusations that Obama ordered the wiretap of Trump Tower. Now, what they're trying to say here is they're trying to say that that Trump made the accusation that he was wiretapped, and that so much pressure has been brought on him because his statement was false, it was inaccurate, and therefore even now he is pushing back on that and saying, well, I didn't really mean that. And this is a complete lie. It's just a spin. Donald Trump is still stating very clearly that he was surveilled. He's not pushing back on that and saying, well, I really wasn't surveilled. That's not happening at all. What he specifically said was on the term wiretapped, that what he meant was he was under surveillance. So they're taking a word and they're spinning his entire position into making it sound like that Donald Trump has admitted that his claim that he was under surveillance is a mistake, that he really didn't mean it, or he shouldn't have said it, or that he was wrong. He's not stating that at all. He's not stating that he wasn't wrong about being under surveillance, that the Obama administration had him, were spying on him and members of his staff, trying to destroy his presidency and his candidacy. He's not saying that at all. You got to read the article. In fact, if you just actually, when you go to the Reuters page, scroll down and you can just see every single story, of which there's about 15, 18 stories there that you can look at. You can just look at the title of every single story that's written by these fools and these fake news people at Reuters, and you can see that every single title of every article is a spin job. Everything is spun to make it look like it's something it's not. It's just amazing, and you see the same thing at the New York Times. Now, also, in their statement, Schiff and Conaway also stated that they're still sending out invitations for witnesses. Invitations! It's an invitation. It's like to the bar mitzvah, to the party, to the ceremony. These are not invitations. They should be freaking subpoenas. And we already know that these people from the Obama administration, as we've seen with Susan Rice, and it'll be the same with all these people, they do not want to come and testify, and if they do, it's only going to be in classified or closed sessions. They're doing everything they can to avoid it. There should not be invitations. There should be subpoenas. These are not invitations. Hey, Rogers and Comey, why don't you come on over and talk to the committee for a while behind closed doors, and we just want to give you a little invitation, and we'll order up some coffee and donuts, maybe have lunch, talk about the kids, the grandkids, the golf game. That's what an invitation is. No, these should be subpoenas. Goodness gracious. And they're looking forward to the next steps of the investigation, including the open hearing with Clapper, Yates, and Brennan. By the way, Brennan has rescheduled. He will not be there on Monday, but Yates and Clapper will be there on Monday for some more conversation based on the invitation they received. I'm sure they'll all go out and have drinks down in Georgetown afterwards, have a good chuckle and a good laugh. So basically what's going on here is they're just going to try to drag this thing out forever and ever and ever and hope that you will forget about it. But I will not forget about it. I can promise you that. I'm on this thing like white on rice. And I'm not letting go. So long as Trump, until I see Trump actually stand up and say, okay, I just don't even care anymore. I don't care if they surveil me. I'm not going to pursue this. I'm not going to continue to push for the hearings to get to the bottom of it. I'm not going to file a civil suit. I'm not going to keep pushing on this. When I see Donald Trump throw up the white flag and walk away, I'll throw up the white flag and walk away, because there'll be no need to do anything anymore unless there's people still working the story, which I might. But at this point, I haven't seen that. Everything appears to me, watching Trump, he has every intention of getting to the bottom of it. But he's a very smart character, and if you're Donald Trump, there's a couple advantages to letting this thing play itself out. One of them would be to let them kick this thing down the road for 2 years or so. Because what happens in about 2 years? Well, you're going to have the midterm elections, and then you're going to have the beginning of the 2020 presidential campaign. What a better time to have some serious hearings, probably in civil court, or have Jeff Sessions actually take over and find that there's enough evidence to put in a prosecutor and a grand jury and to go ahead and proceed that way. What a better time than right after the midterm elections or leading up to the midterm elections to go ahead and see some of these, a lot of these Democrats being forced to sit there and go under oath and explain their illegal activities. I mean, that's actually a pretty smart move. So maybe his patience is based on looking ahead at the midterms and his 2020 re-election. Would be very good timing. So I think there's several motivations, but Trump just seems to me to be the type of person that when you screw him like that, he isn't going to forget. He doesn't look like a guy who's just going to say, the heck with it. Right now, he's busy. He's got a lot of things on his plate, but I think in the back of his mind, he's watching this stuff play out, and he has no intention on backing off. I think he is eventually going to get these people and get them under oath and get some truth out of them. So anyway, you can look at that Reuters article and read it for yourself. It's so obviously, blatantly a spin job, and these buzzwords that they use. But the buzzwords coming from Schiff and Conaway tell me that these guys have cut a deal. They're going to cover each other's butts. Neither of them want to stand up to the military-industrial complex, and the intelligence agencies are terrified of them. The deep state, they have too many donors, too many big money people that don't want any of this coming out. So they're going to participate again in the cover-up. Shame, shame, shame. If Mr. Conaway is your representative, you need to get on the phone, send him an email, do whatever. Now, just so you know, I have contacted Trey Gowdy's office on 3 or 4 occasions, by email 2 times, by telephone 2 times. I have made it perfectly clear what witnesses I would like to see there and specific questions that I think that needs to be asked. Now, whether or not Trey Gowdy has actually gotten my messages, I don't know. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You know, when John Boehner was my congressman here in the 8th District, I literally would call him 3 times a week. I called his office in Washington and a local office. It got to the point where they eventually blocked my number at the local office. And when I called his office there in Washington, they would literally, I could tell, they would set the phone down and just walk away and let me complain for 15 minutes. I sent him 2 or 3 emails a week. I rode his ass to death for years, literally for years. I mean, I think they saw my number pop up and said, oh man, not this guy again. I just wore John Boehner out for the entire time that he was my congressman here in the 8th District. And so, I mean, I drive these people nuts. But yes, I have communicated with Trey Gowdy's office and laid out exactly where I think this is going and the questions I think need to be asked, and we'll see what happens. But if your congressman is Conaway, Mike, or whatever his name is, Conaway, who's heading that committee now, you certainly need to be sending him an email, contacting his people on the phone, and pushing this guy to let him know that you are serious about getting to the bottom of this surveillance. And pressure, you know, sometimes pressure can work. At least ways to make them sweat, make them ask a few serious questions. I wish to God I was on that committee. In fact, if I was in charge of this thing, I would have had it wrapped up in 2 weeks. I know exactly the people I need to call. I know exactly the questions I need to answer to get to the bottom of the surveillance on Trump and his team. I know that. As far as the Russian collusion, as far as Russian being involved in our elections, I think that's all a complete smokescreen. It's political cover for a failed Hillary Clinton campaign to protect the Democrats, because quite honestly, it's kind of hard to go to your big donors after you just lost $1.2 billion of their money and ask them to contribute again. They have to have some reason, some excuse why they lost, besides the fact that they ran a horrible campaign with a horrible candidate, with a horrible campaign team, a bad logo, no message, no policy positions. Only 21% of Hillary's commercials during that campaign had to do with policy. The other 70-odd% of it was attack ads on Donald Trump's character. So that's what we get in the Reuters article, which I'll provide the link for you. Now, in the New York Times, it's even more ridiculous, which I'll also provide the link for you there. And it uses the phrase again. They continue to use this phrase, which I have debunked over and over and over again. That, again, here's a quote of part of a couple sentences where they say, the incidental collection of Trump and associate. So they're talking about 90% of the article is about Russia hacking, Russia and Trump. Then they give one paragraph, about 3 or 4 sentences, where they talk about the surveillance. And then all they really say is, yes, and of course they're also looking into the incidental collection of Trump and associates. This is the mainstream media narrative, is to downplay as much as possible the real crime and the real something based on real facts that we know really did happen, based on the dossier and everything that goes along with it, the FISA warrants, the unmasking, the revealing of Flynn's phone call, all these things that actually did happen, that we have facts and evidence to support, while spending 90% of their time focused on Russia collusion, which is no evidence whatsoever. In fact, it's completely debunked by the dossier itself and the Russians involving themselves in our elections, which is, it's pie in the sky. I mean, you can make a general statement that the Russian intelligence people maybe have some influence in our election. They maybe try to do some things, but every government does that. We influence and try to influence elections all over the world. We overthrow governments. We do all sorts of things. All governments engage in some level of this activity. But I can assure you that the Russians do not have the time, the resources, they do not have the money, they do not have any of that to focus that much energy on overturning an American election. The amount of impact they could have, even if they wanted to do that, is so minimal it doesn't even show up on the radar screen. And keep in mind, is they're writing these stories in the New York Times or Reuters or any other of these, ABC, NBC, CNN, any of these people, their original reason that they gave, that the FBI, that Comey gave back a long time ago in a hearing, where he said, well, we believe that the Russians wanted to hack the DNC to get the opposition research that the Democrats had on Donald Trump. Now keep in mind that the alleged hacking occurred somewhere in that first 2 weeks of June. We know that that's somewhere about the time when the leak or hack or whatever occurred, the alleged hack, which I believe is a leak. Well, at that time, if you remember, all the polls were showing Donald Trump 20 points behind. They were showing Hillary Clinton winning in a massive landslide, not just in popular vote, but electoral votes. Every single one of the mainstream media stations where they're showing you all the blue wall, showing you where Trump was probably going to lose Georgia. He was going to lose South Carolina. He was going to lose Florida. He was definitely going to lose all these areas, all the Rust Belt. Donald Trump, at the time when this occurred, the alleged hacking, had no chance whatsoever of winning the election, according to all the polls and all the mainstream, including Fox News. At that point, Donald Trump hadn't closed the gap. So if the Russians were interested in getting opposition research, they would probably want it on Hillary, because that's likely who everyone said that would be president, not Trump. And also the Russians, knowing the Russians and how their intelligence works, Donald Trump's a public man. They don't need the Democrats' opposition research on Trump. He's a public person. They can get, and I doubt that they would trust the Democrats' opposition research. The Russians have their own intel people embedded, thousands of Russian intel people embedded in the United States here, and have been for years. They would get their own opposition research on Donald Trump. So, I mean, none of it makes any sense. It's insanity. But this is the narrative that continues to play out in the face of evidence that proves completely otherwise. There is no evidence to support Russia-Trump collusion. If there was, we would have heard it by now. There is very little evidence other than just general knowledge that governments do engage in intelligence activities in foreign countries. But other than that, there's no specific information that the Russians did anything that had any impact on the election at all. And as I mentioned yesterday, Comey actually let slip out in those hearings yesterday that when he was asked about this, as John McCain was pursuing, or Lindsey Graham was pursuing that line of questioning, and he talked about, well, we've determined that there were many internet trolls, and we've got to combat these people. And I just thought, how ridiculous. Anyone that was on their computer during the Republican and Democratic primaries and during the general election knows that there was literally millions of trolls from all directions. And we know that from the WikiLeaks emails, the DNC emails, that the Clinton campaign actually was paying tens of millions of dollars to trolls to go troll first Bernie Sanders supporters and then Donald Trump supporters. It's just everything is backwards. Up is down, left is right. I mean, it's just it's beyond Orwellian. It's just insanity. But ultimately, they can continue this all they want. But as long as people like myself continue to press and press and press and keep this in the public eye, as long as we all continue to make sure that our friends and family and others who we talk with on the internet or communicate with, as long as we keep this story moving, and as long as Donald Trump does not throw up the white flag and decide he's just tired of dealing with it anymore, as long as he continues to pursue it, and I believe he will, and I believe eventually it will end up in civil court hearings, that the truth will eventually come out. And again, I go back to Watergate. Took 2.5 years. Nixon wins a 48-state landslide, and everybody comes up to Woodward and says, well, I guess there goes your Watergate story. Doesn't matter now. Nixon just won in a 48-state landslide. But they never backed off the story, and they would have weeks and weeks and weeks of total lull period where there was nothing at all happening, nothing coming up out of it. But they never dropped the story. They never dropped the story because Woodward continued a relationship with Deep Throat, who kept telling him, hey, man, don't quit on the story. I know it's frustrating you, but stay on the story. Keep following the money. Keep tracking the money. Follow where the money from the donors went. Follow where it went, because eventually you will get your hook in on this story. And eventually that's exactly what happened. So this is why you never know what's going to come to the forefront. You never know when a whistleblower might come out. You never know what could happen. I believe the civil hearings are the best way to get to the bottom of this. But again, we just have to stay on it and not get too discouraged because it doesn't happen as quickly as we would like. We all know exactly what happened and what didn't happen, so we just have to stay after it. And let's see what else we got here. Yeah, I did have a comment already. Someone put in the comment section, why do you think that Susan Rice doesn't want to testify? Well, it might have something to do with the fact that she's guilty as hell. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Susan Rice sitting there explaining why I unmasked all those people, started creating massive spreadsheets and disseminating that information. That's some pretty illegal stuff, unless she's got some good evidence to back it. And the evidence that she would need to back it is probably based on the FISA warrant of the that was based on the dossier, which we now know was discredited. And when you get into that line of questioning, it's a road that Susan Rice and her accomplices do not want to go down. They do not want to go down that road at all. Now, there was also a little something about James Comey in the FBI trying to get to the bottom of these leakers, because remember, it's not just the leaked phone call with Mike Flynn, which, I mean, they should have sniffed that one out a long time ago, but there's been many other leaks. And of course, James Comey even talked, it's funny in the hearing, I didn't bring it up yesterday, but Dianne Feinstein was asking him about, yeah, well, you released that Comey report, the Comey letter, 11 days before the election. And Comey said, yeah, but he said, I didn't release that to the media. I released that only to the members of the committee, to let the committee know that I was reopening the investigation based on the fact that we just discovered 600,000 new emails on Anthony Weiner's computer, many of them that were from Hillary Clinton's communications that were not coming from the State Department. They were coming from her own private server. And so he thought, hey, we thought that may be where all those missing emails are, including the first 3 months we couldn't find. So this is what Comey responded to Feinstein with, and then she came back to him and said, yes, but you know, Mr. Director, that how things are leaked, and you knew that would all be leaked, and it was leaked within an hour. She said, you know, we got the Comey letter, and within a couple hours it was all over the news media, which just goes to show that the idea that Comey is trying to get to the bottom of all these leaks, the idea that anyone in the intel community is trying to get to the bottom of any of these leaks is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you know, it's just it's hard to believe, but I mean, it's like, but no, I would do like Trey Gowdy suggested, that instead of these invitations to testify, they need to be subpoenas. And if I needed to with Susan Rice, hey, I would send her a subpoena, a box of Pampers, and a couple rolls of Charmin, and tell her to be there at the hearing. So, you know, I don't know, folks. But I'll continue to stay on the story, and we'll continue to follow it every day. On Monday, I guess we'll have some interesting things happen. Again, on Monday, we have Yates and Clapper. That's right. Good old Jim Clapper. I'm sure he'll tell the truth. Yes, he'll tell the truth. Were you involved in any political operations to help to try to destroy the political campaign of Donald Trump and his presidency afterwards? No, not wittingly. Not wittingly. And so it should be a lot of fun on Monday. So we'll get back at it. And anyway, I'll be back tomorrow and Sunday with an update if anything should break on TowerGate. And we'll keep following the story. I'm also going to do a follow-up on the investigation, the Sarah Carter investigation with her whistleblower. I've been working on that too on the side, and just trying to see when that story is going to break, and it's just absolutely amazing. So I got some thoughts, kind of an update on that, and I'm sure I'll probably do that over the weekend sometime. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. That's what we got for today. TowerGate, day 63, May the 5th, 2017. Y'all take care. Bye.